Africa ready? Yes. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you, John. I'm going to make a presentation on the findings on Africa. I was one of the co-chairs together with my colleague from Senegal. His name is Jacques André Dione. Just like the other assessments, we started off with the Regional Environmental Information Network Conference that we held in April 2015 in Johannesburg. What that conference did was to reaffirm the running theme of GEO-6, which is Healthy Planet, Healthy People. But in addition to that, they also decided that we should look at our natural capital, how we can bring value to that, and how we can protect that. We also went through our list of priorities, and it was quite a basket full, ranging from our adaptive capacity to climate change to our poor land use management practices. I will not go through the whole list, but it was quite a long list. But what's important is that out of this list, we're able to come up with an annotated outline, and on which basis we're able to conduct our first writing session through the September 2015 book sprint, which was held here in Nairobi. Thereafter, we had our high-level group meeting to review and go through our report, basically to validate our findings. Coming to the key findings themselves, we are of the view that Africa is basically on the rise. The indicators of the recent past have been showing that, especially on GDP, which has been averaging a growth of 4%. But that's not to say the whole of Africa has been growing. We have a few countries that have been growing quite fast, Ethiopia being one of them. There is quite a huge appetite for infrastructure development, and that's one cause for our growth. And we have a youthful population ready to work, a huge demand for, or a huge market for the future. So that also indicates an Africa that is on the rise. There is a big however, though, that we are growing from a very small base. Our combined GDP is just over $2.4 trillion, which is equal to that of Brazil, almost equal to that of Brazil. We are 54 countries in Africa, and here we're comparing ourselves to just one big country, Brazil. And besides that, much of this is coming from few countries, the biggest economies, Nigeria, South Africa, Egypt, and so on. There is also the big however in the sense that the commodities on which our economies are very much dependent on, the prices of which are falling. We, however, believe that we are on the right policy framework for a sustainable growth as well as a healthy environment. And much of that is centered around what we call Agenda 2063 and its 10-year planning cycles, as well as Agenda 2030 or the SDGs. In order to sustain the growth and to make it more inclusive, we strongly believe that we need a healthy planet, and also we need to be healthy ourselves. But if we look at our air, does it indicate that kind of health that we want? We are low emitters when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions, but our strong dependence on biomass fuels for energy, lighting, and so on means that 90% of our population is exposed to indoor air pollution and the associated health challenges that come with that. Actually, the numbers from literature show that 600,000 deaths that occur every year have something to do or have some linkage to do with indoor air pollution. Outdoor air pollution is also becoming a big problem, especially in the cities, driven mainly by our aged vehicles. On the side of water, it's more about access. We did quite well when it comes to the Millennium Development Goals, growing by almost 24% when it comes to access to safe drinking water. But when you go to the actual numbers, the numbers of people without access, we are increasing. As at the end of the MDGs, we're talking about 40% people who had no access to safe drinking water. On the sanitation side, the situation is actually much more difficult. The availability of water resources, we have a few countries that are water stressed, and we have huge discoveries of groundwater, the quantities of which we don't know yet, and the quality of which we don't know yet. Related to our access to safe drinking water, we have some serious health challenges. 8% of our annual deaths in the region are due to waterborne diseases. So you can see the big connection between our access to safe drinking water and our health. When it comes to land, this is our most prized asset for production of food and so on. Literature tells us that 60% of land that can be used for agriculture globally, but which is not yet converted, is in Africa. So that's a huge opportunity for investment, both local domestic investment and international investment. However, we have a very big challenge when it comes to the production levels. Our productivity is very, very low. If you look at maize, a crop that is grown across the region, we are talking of an average of less than 1 ton per hectare, whereas other regions are talking of 10 tons plus. When it comes to biodiversity, we have a big challenge with invasive alien species. Our water bodies are choked by water hyacinth. Not all of them, but those that are, it's quite a big challenge. But we also have some invasive alien species that have brought some commercial value or commercial business to the region. The Nile perch in Lake Victoria is one that we cite, as well as the carpenter in Kariba. There is also the big problem around illegal trade of wildlife. We had a good discussion early in the day. I will not go into details, but I must say Africa is one of those regions where the scourge is quite big. Zoonosis, we also had a very good discussion in the morning, and in as far as we are concerned, it is more about understanding the relationship between wildlife and people when it comes to health matters. We have Ebola, we have Zika, and so on, which have roots in Africa, but whose connection is still being studied. When it comes to the policies, we believe that we have much of the needed policies in place. But where we fall short is on implementation. We also don't seem to be learning from each other within the region as well as abroad. With regards to air, when it comes to indoor air pollution, we have some quick fixes that we can work on. Well-ventilated housing is one of them. Here we don't mean air-conditioned houses, but at least houses that have windows or air houses that let air in and out. Some of the quick fixes also include clean cook stoves. There are several of those. The GGEO here in Kenya is one of them. Off-grid power to provide clean sources of energy is another, be it from solar, microhydro, or picohydro. On the long-term fixes, we are talking of major investments, especially in hydropower, where only 10% has been developed so far. So there is quite some opportunity to develop the remaining 90% of our potential. Our mass public transport, when it comes to outdoor pollution, especially in the cities, needs to be worked on. Water, it's more about knowing what we have, especially on the groundwater side, better protection of our catchment areas, and prioritization of government investments into water delivery for sanitation, for safe drinking water as well as sanitation. When it comes to land, we have a very brilliant policy in the form of the Comprehensive Africa Agricultural Development Program. It has some interesting budgetary targets, some interesting irrigation targets, which, if followed, can actually result in us producing enough for ourselves. On the biodiversity side of things, we recently had an Africa Union strategy to deal with illegal wildlife trade, and it's more on how we implement that, and if it is implemented well, we think we are of the view that we may be able to score a bit of some successes around illegal wildlife trade. Lastly, we need to deal with our institutions. There is need for flexibility. There is need for capacity, both technical and human resources. There is need for data. I'll give an example. We always talk about the extractive sector being big in Africa and growing in Africa. But recent numbers coming out of UNEP show that in the 1970s, our global contribution by value was around 7.9%. Come 2010, that had gone down to 7%. I don't think those numbers are real for Africa. There is a lot of underreporting. Actually, the graph that is generated out of the data shows just a flat. There is no growth, there is no decline, meaning there is a lot of underreporting on the extractive sector for Africa. These are some of the key findings and policy messages that are coming out of Africa. The report itself is available, and I'm quite pleased to have coordinated this process with my colleague, but this presentation is on behalf of several other authors who contributed to this work. Thank you.
Thank you, Clever. And I certainly hope the material is online. I understand through UNEP Live and as well as there are a few hard copies, but as we're trying to move into the electronic age. Our next speaker will present on Latin America and the Caribbean. He is Diego Martino from Uruguay. And Diego, I welcome your report.
Thank you, John. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. As you can see, I am one of the co-chairs of the report. My colleague, Keisha Garcia from Trinidad and Tobago, is sitting right there. And just as Clever was saying, this was done in collaboration with a great group of clever and very patient authors and a very, very supporting secretariat. So thank you for all of those who are here and those that are not. So just to present a first picture to show the context. These are the regional priorities that were selected for this report, and these regional priorities come from the RAIN conference that happened in May last year in the context of the report, but also from the meeting of the Forum of Ministers from Latin America and the Caribbean that happened the year before the RAIN meeting. So these 6 LAC regional priorities are the ones that are treated throughout the report. But it's important to understand how diverse this region is. This is a figure that shows the arid and humid regions of Latin America and the Caribbean. And as you can tell, we have from the most arid regions in the world, the Atacama Desert, where it hardly rains, to some of the most humid regions in the world in the western Amazonia. And there are only a few kilometers from one to the other. So it's an extremely diverse region that we are dealing with. And it's also diverse in terms of the environmental drivers and the environmental issues that are happening in the region. Here we see South America, Mesoamerica, and the Caribbean on top, and we see the rate of annual change in forest extent. And as you can tell, South America is still losing forest cover. It's doing it at a slower rate than it was doing in the previous years. But the Caribbean, on the other hand, is gaining forest extent, so forest cover. So it's an extremely diverse region, also in terms of what's happening environmentally within it. But it has some commonalities, and the heavy dependence of the economies of Latin America and the Caribbean countries on natural resources is shown in this graph. On top we have the Caribbean, in the middle we have Mesoamerica, and down we have South America. And it shows that between 30 and 35% of exports of goods and services come from natural resources and the environment. It's different in the Caribbean than it is in Mesoamerica and South America. In the Caribbean, it's mainly tourism, with some countries like Bahamas and St. Lucia having 80% of the GDP depending on these resources. And in South America and Mesoamerica, mainly food exports and non-renewable resource exports, 40 to 50% in some cases. It's also the most urbanized region in the world, with over 80% of its people living in urban areas. This is very significant, and there are some good news here. The percentage of people living in slums in Latin America and the Caribbean was 30% in the year 2000, and it's 20% in 2010. So that's a although the absolute number of people remains the same, the percentage has gone down on 10%, which is very significant. But urban areas present, although there are opportunities, and there are many opportunities that we show in the report, they also present challenges and pressures to the environment. The lack of proper urban planning, mainly in small and medium-sized cities, but also in big cities. Low or non-existent water treatment facilities in many places, and inadequate solid waste management are some of the issues that are still persisting in Latin American urban areas. And just to show one, and we'll start getting into the state and trends in some of the water, air, land, etc. And this shows the average annual concentration of particulate matter in Latin American cities. As you can tell, every single city that is being measured is going over the WHO standards. So it's fair to say that all the cities that are being measured is because some problems with air quality are happening there, but every single one of them is going over the standards. And it's also interesting to note where all these people are located. Yes, it's 80% urban, but it's also more than 60% of the people living in Latin America and the Caribbean live within 100 kilometers of the coastal area. And if we go to the Caribbean, many of these states, if you go, you cannot go more than 100 kilometers from the coastal area. And this presents significant challenges to the marine and coastal environments. This is, for example, the coral reefs classified by integrated local threat in 2014. I don't know how well you can see the dots, but most of them are showing us high or very high impact from local threats. Those are coming from land use, climate change effects, alien invasive species, and coral disease. And going into rivers in South America, this is the existing under construction and planned dams in Latin America. And you can see in the one in the middle, the circle in the middle is the Amazon basin. You can see in blue the existing dams, in orange the ones being constructed, and in red the ones planned to be constructed. You can tell that although it is one of the least fragmented river ecosystems in South America, there's a plan for building numerous hydroelectric dams in that river. So it is going to be pressured in the next few years. In terms of land, this graph shows in blue going up the agriculture coverage, and in green going down forest coverage trends for 2000 and 2012. The trend is we have more agricultural area and we have a diminishing forest. But the increase of agricultural area is also affecting other crucial ecosystems. This is a change in the area of crops, and it's showing mainly the Pampas region. What you see there in yellow and green is in Uruguay and Argentina is one of the biggest grassland ecosystems. And in the last 10 to 15 years, it has been heavily affected by an increasing area of agriculture, mainly for soy production for export. These changes in ecosystems are, of course, affecting species. This shows lag-threatened species. We have more than 30% of mammals threatened, and more than 40% of amphibians threatened. As many of you know, amphibians are indicator species. And what happens with climate change? You can think of any of the expected impacts of climate change, and they will probably be happening in Latin America in the next 50 to 70 years. And what climate change is doing is it's exacerbating many of the existing environmental problems. One example, which I think Mark was referring to in North America, is algae blooms. We are having already some algae blooms in the region because of fertilizers flowing into the rivers, and the climate change might exacerbate the problems when you have more heat waves with, for a longer period of time. You may get more algae blooms. So existing environmental problems are being exacerbated by climate change. So what are some of the key policy messages that came from the report? Innovative solutions to decouple economic growth and resource consumption, ecosystem-based resilience, climate change adaptation. It is key to keep our existing valuable ecosystems in place in order to build resilience. Use of a range of policy support tools to strengthen the science-policy interface, improve the scientific evidence-based, and build capacity. We found that there are many areas where we're needing a lot more data, more consistent data in the region. Build on progress made in participation, indigenous peoples and local knowledge, and private sector. We concluded that many of the issues that are being dealt with in Latin America right now are because civil society put them on the table. And that's a very important role that needs to be kept, but also governments are trying to bring the private sector and non-governmental organizations into the discussions more often. And finally, intergovernmental coordination to deal with regional issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Diego, for the very comprehensive presentation there. Last but not least, in terms of our regional reports, is West Asia. The coordinating lead authors were unfortunately unable to join us, but we do have with us Dr. Rula Kalubi, who is the regional coordinator for DIWA, the Division of Early Warning and Assessment for West Asia, with UNEP. So, Dr. Kalubi.
Good afternoon, everybody. You're tired. It's the end of the day, and our region is the last one. I must extend my apology on behalf of our co-chairs and coordinating lead authors. They'll be coming to UNEA for the SP Forum, unfortunately. They have previous of their commitments. So for the West region, the assessment for this GEO reporting took on the same as other regions, which is different compared to other GEO assessment reporting. The same in terms of collating and collecting collaboration into looking into priorities, challenges, and how to look into answer any of the challenges, giving the framework or policy propositions or complementing existing, framework of doing environmental governance. So the similarity with other regions is that we had to go through first the RAIN conference in Amman, and in Amman kind of picked up on regional priorities and what the academics and practitioners, and this is how it is different from other GEO reporting, is that it was a grassroots movement in terms of gathering literature into compilation of this report. So we had 53 participants from different walks of life and different countries within the region. And so they came up with 12 regional priorities. At top, because of the existing conflict in the region, peace and security and the environment kind of took the lead on what is the priorities and aspiration of the region in terms of what they want to deliver for this, as a message for this report. Now, the regional meeting in Bahrain kind of concurred on all, went ahead and looked into endorsement of the study, the analysis, and the contributions. And this is also emphasizing on the emerging issues in the region. And there are, as the report, I was told that the report today was, yesterday was launched, and so you can look at the emergence issues as well. So, given the priorities and emerging issues, the regional meeting in Bahrain, which happened in March of this year, and we had, we were fortunate to have our 3 HLG members, our co-chairs, and our scientific advisory committee as well. And we had 3 coordinating lead authors present into the meeting. Well, one actually apologized. But what they did is, giving the amount of contribution that happened, they endorsed grassroots contribution in terms of, this is what we want to tell about West Asia region. And then also they worked on the development of the key messages that we want to bring into to surface. So this would be what we want the world to know, and have the leaders of West Asia address in them. I think we need to do one more. Oh, there's no picture. Oh, so this is kind of the March meeting picture. It was a closed meeting, and it was very, very productive, and we came up with little amendments, and we did that, and it's reflected in the online report. So as emphasized, peace, security, and the environment was kind of heading the headline for all the discussion, as the conflict is erupting on a daily basis in the Middle East. Also emphasizing on regional priorities in the Nexus framework. And the nice thing about this Nexus is that we looked into 2 alternative views into if we really coordinated issues related to water, energy, and food, we can have the peace and security as an outcome. So examining the nexus in terms of how it feeds into peace and security was really elaborated in the report, and it presents a different take on how why the nexus would be important. Also, among the key findings into looking into the West Asian region, probably I want to say the same environmental challenges as highlighted in previous GEO reporting, but there's different emerging issues. So what we have is increased water demand and continuous overexploitation of not just the surface water, also the groundwater. The leading authors and coordinating lead authors looked into how the lack of regional coordination in the region is actually manifesting the overexploitation in many different forms. Regions are going through one running water day. Some other countries do twice a week. It is it's affecting way of life. Of course, this brings us to the unsustainable consumption, given that agricultural sector contribution to GDP in the region is actually decreasing. So when the West Asia need to import most of its food and everything else, This is kind of national security issues for most regions, most countries in West Asia. Of course, because of there are some contribution regarding the biodiversity loss, the continuous degradation of the biota, the lack of framework makes the loss in biodiversity happens at an accelerated level. Now, this brings us, with the biodiversity, into the desertification that is taking place at an increasing level as well. But this results from many economic and social activities like dredging, land reclamation, and this actually, and we can see the effects of the decrease in biodiversity in increased dust storms that is affecting not just West Asia region, but others. Air pollution, whether it's indoor or outdoor, for many reasons why there is separate indoors and outdoors, because the West Asia region is actually composed of two sub-regions, one that is related to the Gulf Cooperation Council, and one what's called is the Mashriq countries. This includes the Syria, the Iraq, the Jordan, the Palestinian occupied territories, including Yemen. Indoor pollution is a problem because there is, in the GCC bloc, and it is highlighted in the report that this comes out not in terms of government intervention, in terms of legislation, policy prescription, but in terms of awareness, because really this comes from the household exercise of indoor pollution activities. Waste management, it's wonderful on an initiative basis. It's never addressed in a holistic manner, which makes the payback period for projects really very, very short. And this is the emphasis in terms of cleaner recycling and cleaner closing the loop of production and consumption into into industries. And this is, by the way, in all countries in West Asia. Energy efficiency and energy mix is a priority. It's just like, because there is so much oil dependent production and consumption, so it's finding the balance between having renewable energy versus carbon-based activities. And so, because of there is, now, if I want to take a look at each one of them, it's just really hard to say, I want to just adopt one, say, school of thought to address one priority. And so when we do that, we end up losing. It has to be looked into holistically to achieve the peace and security and elevate the increasing level of conflict and the effect on the environment, because conflict is affecting the environment negatively. So this brings the holistic approach, integrated approach. Now, some contributors talked about environmental impact assessment framework. Some contributors looked at SEAs, strategic environmental assessment, and there is an overall the IEA, which is the integrated approach. So whatever is going to work, it depends on the country. Whatever it works, just get on with it. And so the key policy questions for West Asia that came out of the report, actually it's twofold. One regarding the governance. There are governance, it's just not effective. So how to invigorate it, how to make it really vibrant, talking to the nature of the priorities and the challenges of West Asian countries. So the policies are good. Policies are good. They just have to be anchored in a holistic approach. So integrated approach and look into social, economic, and environmental aspect of the policy. And this is how to bring the science into the environment, science into the policy. And of course, with integrated approach, you can look into how different vulnerabilities are really mapped, and how one is causing the other, or one is the prerequisite to other. So in looking into the connection between these vulnerabilities. Now, economic diversification has been the focus for the GCC block because it's carbon-based production and consumption. So there is a move, a huge move in the GC bloc to push for the green agenda, green economy, implement green economy principle, using the diversification of the economic machine in these countries. Now, it's a little bit different levels at different countries. For example, the UAE is just like taking the lead in many initiatives in relation to green economy. It's slow because you're bringing the society back. It's like at the tail end of the code of how it's moving about. And so, instead of doing ad hoc, we have to make, we have, as West Asia, send the message to institutionalize these policy and not make it just a one-time thing that will bring the best in policy, and having what's actually missing, not just in West Asia, as I noticed, in a lot of countries, is just there is no feedback loop into the effectiveness of the policy. And this is where science can kick in and say quantification of social well-being, economic added value of the policy, and of course the environmental aspect. A lot of countries in West Asia are adopting the 2030 agenda, and they are looking into the goals and target and trying to institutionalize these targets as part of their business. There's a lot, and there are different, I want to say, social capital among different countries, and so probably for West Asia, it really needs a lot of coordination, regional coordination among leaders to agree that this needs to be brought up into one speed. And so effective governance would be one part, but in terms of policy design, it's doing business as usual may be good. It's not like we are going to throw it out. And the recommendation was not throwing it out. It's just like taking the policy and see what needs to be amended in an innovative way. So innovation using the science in policy, not just I think, but the coordinating lead authors and our scientific advisory panel agreed that this needs to be brought into a new level, that make the policy adaptable rather than just let's, I'm sorry, I'm over, okay, almost done. So making the policy adaptable to the challenge at hand, and how to make the link in policy design. That includes data collection, institutionalizing data collection on a regular basis, building the knowledge-based society, which requires a lot of strategic media and outreach programs. And of course, we cannot eliminate the R&D, research and development, from policy design. And with this, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rula. I have lots of questions and comments and that, but I'm not going to make any of them because I want to open it up. I did promise there would be an opportunity for some interaction. So if there are questions out there, comments, suggestions, I would remind you, don't forget the first three presentations. The presenters, all of whom followed the script and were on time. So you got a little less from them. So if you have particular questions, particularly for North America or for Europe or for Asia Pacific, we would love to hear them. So certainly don't forget them. The coffee hopefully didn't totally wash that from your brain. I think we should give them a quiz. And which type of clouds are these? Well, I heard a lot of common issues, and we do have Sasha.
Yes, congratulations to all the presenters, and very interesting that the regions came with different perspectives, but also many common challenges. I also found it interesting that the European region came with innovative ways, I think, of formulating some of the challenges we have with consumption and production patterns and livelihoods. So I really hope that will be brought into the global GEO as well. My question is also to Joni. Of course, we were very appreciative of that very great presentation and that we now have substantial body of evidence on the link between gender and environment to have a global gender environmental outlook. And my question is really how can this be integrated into the GEO-6? Because I do get the feeling, having looked briefly at the regional GEO assessments, that the gender and environmental nexus is not very well covered in many of the regional assessments, and there would be a real opportunity, it seems, to bring this body of evidence from the gender GEO into the global GEO-6. And that is my question to Joni and the others as well. Thank you.
Are there other questions out there now? We could take a couple, or I could go directly to a response. Not seeing, yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much. I'm Agalis Malini, and I was a GEO-6 fellow, and it was quite a pleasure to learn from the more experienced members working on the GEO reports this year. It's exciting to see them all put together, and especially thrilling as a young female scientist who works on gender analysis, among other things, to see the gender GEO fully fleshed out. And I was wondering what the UNEP's commitment to this report and pursuing some of the goals it outlines, which is partly a follow-up on Sasha's question about integrating gender more thoroughly into the global GEO. Thank you very much.
I'm not sure that there's anybody up here that can answer that question in terms of UNEP's commitment there. I'm sure that there are many members of the high-level panel and the scientific advisory panel who will be meeting over the weekend, and they will certainly, I'm sure, have heard your plea. And as we provide messages for the authors to take under advisement as they get underway with the global GEO, I'm sure that those will be passed on. Seeing no other questions at the moment, I'm going to, Joni, would you like to start off? And then if anybody else would like to click in, we can just let me know. Joni.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you for those questions, Emma and Sasha. I can't speak for GEO-6 and shouldn't try. I would say that we certainly have the capacity and a great deal of common understanding and goodwill to take the GGEO lessons forward into GEO-6. The extent to which that will be happening or in what form that will be happening is outside my realm of expertise or and well above my pay grade. But I don't know if someone else, Pierre, might want to, as I bounce that down to the end of the row, someone involved in GEO-6 would perhaps like to comment on that briefly.
Pierre?
I think John said it quite well. We are having a meeting of the advisory bodies of Global GEO-6 this weekend. and the Secretariat and the advisory bodies will be taking all of this under advisement. Certainly the fact that we do have 6 regional assessments and the GGEO to draw material from is a very strong body of work to work from. So I think that that will be an important consideration as we have our discussions this weekend.
Thank you. In summary, I wanted to draw some points together. I think that while the presentation and the specific language that may have been used for each of the regional GEOs was a little bit different, there were some common themes that actually emerged from them. And I do encourage all of you to really look at them. GEO has, over the decades now, been moving into a much more evidence-based process, data-based process, and it is really with the regional GEOs that you're going to be able to find a lot of that evidence and that data by digging into them and going in the various the electronic layers to get the references, to get the actual data, to get the examples. That being said, I think all of the regions identified that data continues to be a real need, and the need for information, the need for information sharing amongst agencies within governments, the need for information sharing amongst regions that share common resources are all really critical. We are in a time when the Secretary General described a data revolution. And there are opportunities, as we saw from the opening panel, where young people were involved in not only receiving satellite data and information from NASA and others, but to be able to upload their observations and data and information. That really feeds into a second point. We need data, we need regular data, we need continuous data, we need data integration. That can feed into some of the governance processes that were highlighted as solutions. Adaptive government, inclusive and involved government, where citizens are actually involved in contributing to the decisions and engaged in the decision-making process and have access to the information so that they can in fact address their representatives and policymakers by accessing accurate and useful information from governments and from around the world. So open access to data and the need for data and to integrate it. We heard some of the other solutions were natural capital and natural capital accounting identified in many of those. That is an effort by which environmental information is actually integrated with economic and already collected economic and social data from census and from statistical bureaus around the world. So we have some common efforts out there. We have continuing problems in many of the major environmental media. Air continues to be a problem. Water continues to be a problem in many areas. So we can use traditional means of regulation, but we also need to look at integrated ways in which we can address the entire systems. And I think that came out in many of the different regional reports. So those were some common efforts that I heard in listening to the presentations and in reading IMP 17. I have only received some of the documents today, so I can't say that I've read the entirety of all the reports, but I will try to slog through them in the next several months as we go forward. And I'm sure that they will provide an extremely useful foundation for the global GEO. If any members of the panel would like to make a very brief final remark from their seat, that's fine, or if there are any final comments. If not, I think that we have exhausted our time. And I want to thank the authors and the vast numbers of people that contributed to each of these regional assessments and which they represent. So for each of them, for all of them, I'd like a round of applause and thanks to them and their teams. And I thank all of you for being here. We must have dazzled you with the phenomenal presentation so that we left no questions unanswered. And thank you for your presence here. We have one final question. Hopefully it's... Ma'am.
Yeah. I'm Crystal Tole, a student from Baraton University and the DRC National. I have a question on the earlier presentation. She said that there will be a slow progress in Europe concerning air quality in 2030. Yeah. So, what do you think could be the best measures to be taken to accelerate the progress? Because on my point of view, I was thinking maybe to try to redesign the policy in place already, to try to see how to reframe them. And also Africa, it's a suggestion. I think for the next report, if we can have something on waste management, because we are going towards the progress in terms of technology. So I would like to have a kind of a report on waste management in Africa and also on land pollution. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I've been informed that in spite of the fact that we came to the end of our official time, we have a few more minutes. So if you think up another question, feel free. But I'm going to turn to our European representative and then our African representative to make brief comments in response to the question. Diana.
Well, so regarding the progress on air quality, I mean, one of the things is that the low-hanging fruits were collected quite early on. So then we kept, collecting some of them, but obviously they are higher hanging. Well, in terms of sectors, it's easy. It's energy production from fossil fuel, it's transportation. I mean, that's no big surprise there. So unfortunately, the solutions also, we know them, but how do you accelerate? And basically, what you observe even in Western Europe, and that's mainly outdoor pollution. We also have indoor pollution issues, but that's much more sub-regionally concentrated in Central Asia and Caucasus. So basically, this is why I'm saying that slow progress is expected if we don't go beyond what we have. We are not going to go to the WHO guidelines kind of thing. So basically, well, solutions is decarbonize.
Clever.
Thank you for the question. Waste management was raised as one of the priority issues for Africa during our Regional Environmental Information Network. But when it came to putting together our outline for the report and also realizing how waste issues were filtering into every thematic area, we decided to cover this under the air topic, land topic, water topic. So you'll find in the report issues around or discussions around tailings from mining with cases from South Africa. You'll find issues around poor collection of solid waste with some numbers also given. And you'll also find discussions around electronic waste with cases from West Africa. So the topic is covered even though we don't have a specific chapter on waste or a chapter that is specific on waste management. Thank you.
Thank you, Clever. They're waiting for some hard copies of pieces to be delivered, which will be delivered, I guess, in about 20 minutes. Unfortunately, I believe they've taken away our snacks, our coffee, and any snacks. So I can offer you a short, or a brief respite, or if we have additional questions or comments from the reports, I'll be happy to take them now. If not, we'll take a brief 20-minute break. Seeing no additional questions at the moment, I think please don't leave. Take a break. And that, Jackie, you have a comment.
Thank you. Yes, I'd like to reconvene at 5:30, please, because we've got the document, the background document to distribute. So if you come back at 5:30, there will be a summary document, and we'll reconvene for the closing session then. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jackie. So you've got about 25 minutes. Thank you.
And the cafeteria is upstairs, still open, so you can still get a cup of coffee and tea if you want to.